Hawaii is a tropical paradise, a land blessed with spectacular beauty and the spirit of aloha. Dana Ireland was smart, fit, and full of life. She loved the big island of Hawaii. On Christmas Eve, 1991, Dana's life was stolen. She was deliberately run over while riding her bicycle, sexually assaulted, dumped into the bushes, and left to die. A local man confessed to the murder and said 2 brothers helped him. The man recanted his confession, but no one believed him.
It's like the story of the boy who cried wolf. Once you start to tell the truth, nobody gonna listen.
Crime scene DNA did not match any of the 3 men, but all 3 were convicted anyway. It raises questions. Are the 3 convicted men innocent scapegoats? Why aren't the police pursuing the man who left his male DNA on Dana Ireland? Why was exonerating new DNA evidence locked up by court order and not given to the convicted men? In early 1999, the prosecution's case had major problems. The sperm DNA didn't match the 3 defendants. But then a miracle. New witnesses came forward to say the bloody t-shirt belonged to Frank Pauline. On July 21st, 1999, Frank Pauline stood trial in front of a Hilo jury for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Dana Ireland. This is episode 6. Let's review the timeline of the case. Dana Ireland was murdered in December 1991. In June of 1994, Frank Pauline confesses to the crime and implicates Albert Ian Schweitzer and Sean Schweitzer as accomplices. In August 1994, the teeth exemplars of the 3 suspects do not match the bite mark on Dana Ireland's breast. Frank Pauline recants his confession in January 1996.
They believed my lies. What can I say? I'm a good liar. I cannot undo what I did. You know what I mean?
In October 1998, a DNA laboratory reported that the 3 defendants were eliminated as the source of the sperm DNA in the vaginal swabs and on the gurney sheet. Dr. Ed Blake was the DNA expert for Frank Pauline. In a 2004 interview with A&E TV, Dr. Blake stated that he assumed the case against Frank Pauline would be dismissed.
I assumed that the case would be dismissed, that it would never go to trial. I just thought that it was crazy. You couldn't possibly, under this set of circumstances, go to trial. How wrong I was.
In February 1999, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashita wrote that law enforcement had consistently believed a 4th attacker may be involved. Now the lack of a DNA match to the 3 suspects was less of a problem. In May 1999, over 7 years after the murder, new witnesses came forward to implicate the suspects in the crime. 3 of the new witnesses were incarcerated felons who received favors from the prosecutors in exchange for their testimony. Another 3 were witnesses who connected the bloody blue t-shirt at Crime Scene 2 to Frank Pauline. On July 21, 1999, the trial of Frank Raymond Pauline, Jr. began.
It is a trial anticipated for nearly 8 years. Prosecutors say Frank Pauline Jr. confessed, but then recanted.
The lead attorney for the state was Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Charlene Eboshi. Second chair was Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashita. Both attorneys lived in Hilo and grew up on the Big Island. Ms. Eboshi gave the opening statement on behalf of the state of Hawaii.
She was beaten, sexually penetrated, struck, disabled, and just thrown away into the bushes and left to die.
Frank Pauline's attorney was Cliff Hunt, a Honolulu attorney. In his opening statement to the jury, Cliff Hunt emphasized the state's Achilles heel. The sperm DNA was not a match to any of the 3 defendants.
The results showed that the DNA, there was sperm, but the sperm DNA did not match Frank Pauline Jr.'s known DNA because he provided a sample.
Ida Smith was the local woman who found Dana Ireland at crime scene 2. It was a horrific scene.
She had cut off jeans and they were down around her ankle. And her shirt looked like someone had grabbed it and tore it off her like that. And she was all bloody and I didn't know what to do.
One of the witnesses against Pauline was Shane Kobayashi. He had his sentence in a rape conviction reduced from 10 years to 3 years in exchange for his testimony. Kobayashi testified that on Christmas Eve 1991, he was hanging out at a surfing place called Shacks. In his group were the 3 defendants. At one point, they observed Dana Ireland ride by on her bicycle, and the group noticed her. Shortly thereafter, he saw the 3 defendants head off in the purple Schweitzer VW Bug in the direction Dana Ireland had gone.
Kobayashi had his own trouble with the law. He was convicted of sex assault in 1995. He served just 3 years of a 10-year sentence in exchange for his testimony.
Sir, you have a deal, an agreement with the government in this case, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Matter of fact, you have a felony conviction record, correct?
Yes, I do.
Shane Kobayashi's testimony did not mention a 4th suspect in the VW Bug. His testimony was important, however, to the prosecution's case because he tied the 3 defendants together following Dana Ireland in the VW on December 24, 1991. The most important witness in this case never said a word. It was a Jimmy Z brand blue t-shirt found inside out at crime scene 2 near Dana Ireland's dying body. It was not Dana's t-shirt and it was soaked with blood. DNA experts reported that it was Dana Ireland's blood. This is circumstantial evidence. Based upon our common sense and experience, we can infer the killer of Dana Ireland wore the t-shirt. 3 witnesses testified that the blue Jimmy Z t-shirt belonged to Frank Pauline. Even though he had recanted his confession, his t-shirt, covered in Dana Ireland's blood, was compelling evidence that Frank Pauline killed Dana Ireland. One of the new witnesses was Lynn Matthews, a local man who worked on cars. Mr. Matthews testified that the bloody blue Jimmy Z brand t-shirt was the shirt he saw Frank Pauline wear. Another witness, Stephen Deering, recounted that Frank Pauline attempted to hijack a go-kart that belonged to Deering's children in November 1991. Mr. Deering testified the bloody T-shirt was the same shirt that Frank Pauline had on during the go-kart incident. The most convincing witness was Charla Figueroa. She was Frank Pauline's girlfriend in 1991 and lived in the Pauline family house with Frank and their twin boys. She testified that the blue Jimmy Z t-shirt belonged to Frank Pauline. When she saw Frank Pauline's t-shirt on television, covered in blood, Ms. Figueroa said she was in shock.
I was in shock.
And why were you in shock?
Because that's the first time I found out that he was a suspect for this case.
Louise Furtado, the grandmother of Charla Figueroa, testified that Frank Pauline had told her he was involved in the crime. Also, John Gonzalez, Frank Pauline's older half-brother, testified that Frank had told him he was involved in Dana Ireland's murder. Forensic scientist Lisa Calandro was a DNA analyst agreed upon by both the prosecution and defense. Calandro compared the sperm DNA to samples provided by Pauline, the Schweitzer brothers, plus 13 other men. All 16 men were eliminated as donors of the sperm. Lisa Calandro also told the jury that the blood on the Jimmy Z t-shirt belonged to Dana Ireland. Frank Pauline began his testimony by telling how in February 1994 he went to the Halava prison on Oahu. He explained that he was hooked on crack cocaine and was able to get cocaine in prison by promising to pay the dealer back at a later date. When it came time to pay, he had no money, and the drug dealers began threatening his life. At the same time, his brother John Gonzalez was facing drug charges that could send him to prison for up to 10 years. He devised a plan that would get him out of the Halava prison and maybe help his brother John Gonzalez avoid prison time. He would falsely confess to being involved in the Dana Ireland murder.
Make a story up, help him, help myself, before I end up getting killed.
In a 2004 interview with the A&E channel,
I was young and stupid, but that's how I was thinking. Reading newspapers, watching the news, whatever. When I call my friends and stuff, like whatever information they get, I've been putting things together.
Pauline's brother, John Gonzalez, pleaded no contest to third-degree conspiracy in January 1994 and served no jail time. Frank Pauline was transferred out of the Oahu prison to the Maui jail in April 1995. In a 2004 A&E channel interview, Detective Guillermo confirmed that Frank Pauline hoped to help his brother on his drug case.
He did mention that John was about to stand trial for a drug case that he had, and he had hoped that maybe him providing some information may help John in the case.
Frank Pauline denied killing or raping Dana Ireland.
Did you murder or rape Dana Ireland?
No, I didn't.
In his cross-examination, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ishida accused Frank Pauline of trying to convince the jury he was a liar so they wouldn't know he was a murderer.
Isn't it true the bottom line is that you need this jury to believe that you're just a liar?
I don't care if anybody believes me.
that you are a murderer.
I don't care if anybody believes me. The main thing is I'm speaking the truth. That's all I care about.
In the closing arguments of a criminal trial, the prosecution goes first because they have the burden of proof. Then the defense replies with its closing arguments. The last word then goes to the prosecutor to rebut any new issues brought up by the defense. Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ishida addressed the problem that the sperm DNA did not match the three defendants by implying there was a fourth attacker. Ishida argued, quote, "His accomplices, some who he names, some he chooses not to name," end quote. The prosecution's biggest problem was that DNA technology excluded the three defendants as the source of the sperm on Dana Ireland. Lincoln Ishida turned his biggest liability into an asset by telling the jury he wasn't afraid of the DNA evidence. In fact, he embraced it. The prosecutor told the jury, quote, "We're not afraid of that DNA. We embrace it. That same technology places Dana Ireland's blood on Frank Pauline's T-shirt," end quote. On August 27, 1999, the jury arrived at their verdict. The jury found Frank Raymond Pauline Jr. guilty on all counts.
We, the jury in this case, find the defendant guilty of the offense of murder in the second degree.
Sandy Ireland spoke for the family after the guilty verdicts.
It's been 8 years for us looking for justice for Dana, and something really positive finally happened.
Lisa Kaneshiro, the jury forewoman, told reporters that one of the first things the jury decided was that the bloody blue T-shirt found at crime scene 2, next to Dana Ireland's dying body, belonged to Frank Pauline. There was little doubt that the killer, or at least one of the killers, wore the bloody blue T-shirt found next to Dana Ireland. 3 witnesses testified that the T-shirt belonged to Frank Pauline. If this was true, then Frank Pauline's confession, not his recantation, is true. In a 2004 A&E Channel interview, jury forewoman Lisa Kaneshiro gave the reasons for finding Frank Pauline guilty.
All the really compelling evidence, like the bloody T-shirt, the Volkswagen that was repainted, the testimony of Frank Pauline himself, Lieutenant Guillermo's testimony, all these people, all these pieces of evidence together finally overpowered any indecision we might have about the DNA.
On December 26, 2002, the Supreme Court of Hawaii, in a unanimous decision, denied Frank Pauline's appeal and affirmed the jury verdict. In their decision, the court conceded there were defects in procedural safeguards, but there was overwhelming evidence that pointed to Frank Pauline's guilt. The court stated, "At the scene where Ireland's body was found was a T-shirt soaked with Ireland's blood, which was subsequently identified as belonging to Pauline," end quote. Noticeably, there was an elephant in the room. The Supreme Court did not mention that the DNA profiles of Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers were not a match to the sperm. This ends episode 6. We sometimes say that something has the ring of truth. We know the truth when we hear it. It has a ring to it, a harmony. Frank Pauline's conviction was discordant. In episode 7, we'll see the Albert E. and Schweitzer trial. The disharmony will continue.